On the day of its launch, the European Citizens Initiative is sending out a strong message of defiance against the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership with America.
If you are called a stakeholder, that's because the transnationals have accepted you. I don't think any of us here at this table can be considered stakeholders. We may be citizens, but that doesn't give us any rights, and my colleagues will be telling you about the secrecy, about many other negative factors.
First, deregulation. We know that deregulation is at the heart of TTIP. The European Commission and the US government have made completely clear that they see all of the major gains from TTIP coming out of a deregulation, a removal of regulatory barriers to trade. Why? Because the tariff barriers between the European Union and the USA are already at minimal levels, so you won't get very much just by removing tariff barriers as you used to do in the traditional trade agreements. TTIP is a new generation, 21st century trade and investment agreement which aims not at the border, at tariffs, but behind the border, into the regulatory space that we inhabit. And this is particularly dangerous for those of us who are European citizens, because our standards on food safety, our standards on environmental protection, and our standards on labour rights are far higher than the standards that pertain in the United States of America.
Okay, hello everybody. That's not working. Hello everybody. So my name is Michael Efler. I'm the national spokesperson of Mehr Demokratie, a German democracy NGO, More Democracy if you want. And it's very untypical for us to enter a trade or investment debate. That's not our issue in normal circumstances. But as we've entered this debate on TTIP and CETA, we analyze that both negotiations and both agreements are a threat to democracy and also to the principle of the rule of law. And I will try to explain that a little bit more in detail why we view this. First of all, you all know that all these negotiations are very secret. We have a negotiating mandate that is not published, so the whole direction of the negotiations is hidden from the public. No negotiated texts have been released so far to the public, and even some submissions from the US to the European Commission will not be published to the general audience, will only be published to the Commission and not even to the parliaments or to the member states. And this is really pre-democratic in the 21st century, is absolutely unacceptable. But it's not only a question of procedural flaws, it's also a question of substantial problems that we have with these negotiations. And we'll talk about one of the, I think, most controversial issues in both agreements. This is the investment part of both agreements. You know, TTIP and CETA should contain investment protection rules that would be enforced by a mechanism called ISDS. This means investor to state dispute settlement. And I think we all agree that this is not necessary, but on the other hand, it's dangerous. It's not necessary because the US and the European Union has an established legal system. There is a rule of law, and we have no systematic problems with access to justice and with fair process in the courts. We have no reports of systematic discrimination of foreign investors in the US or in the European Union. Last week, I was at a conference in Berlin, and I talked to a guy from an employers organization, and he said to me in private that he asked all his members, small and medium enterprises, hey friends, can you report any evidence of discrimination or of expropriation or unfair discrimination in the US? And no one replied. No one.
John, you've previously described TTIP as an attack on democracy and an end to jobs. Would you care to elaborate a bit on this, please?
Absolutely. I think you only need to look at the European Commission's own report, which it commissioned from the CEPR, the Centre for Economic Policy Research in London. That says quite clearly that at least 1 million jobs are down to be lost as a direct result of TTIP, these negotiations between the EU and the US. How can that be a benefit for working people? But similarly, the attack on democracy is absolutely key. new powers are going to be given to US corporations to bypass domestic European courts and have access to international arbitration tribunals to be able to take our countries before them and claim damages. Again, it's inconceivable for us as Europeans. We have functioning domestic court systems. Why should we be giving these exclusive powers to US corporations to sue our peoples for public policy choices that we make?
But to be fair, I'm sure you'd acknowledge that the EU and the US are not notoriously renowned for attacking democracy or ending jobs. What's their motivation then?
It's a corporate motivation. They're quite clear about this, that this is a big business agenda and it will deliver benefits to big business. If you're in the 1%, you should be supporting TTIP. But if you're in the 99%, you definitely shouldn't. And what we've seen from other free trade deals over the past 20 years is exactly the same outcomes. It leads to massive job losses, a lowering of workers' standards and workers' rights, and an environmental catastrophe as well. Once again, go to the European Commission's own report on this. They estimate there's going to be an extra 11 million tonnes of carbon dioxide released into the environment as a direct result of TTIP.
European citizens' initiatives, they have been both successful and unsuccessful in the past. What chance do you feel this ECI has?
I think it's got a huge chance, and the reason for that is because we've got very strong trade union backing for it, obviously with millions and millions of members. We also have the new platforms like Campact in Germany, 38 Degrees in Britain, which use social media to be able to get millions of people engaged in this. I would see it as being highly, highly likely that we will get these 1 million signatures really fairly quickly, and then we can use that to build more and more pressure on the European Commission and on the European Council of Ministers to change their mind on TTIP and on CETA.